Hello, my name is Anne-Marie Ronsman and I'm the training manager for CASA Child Advocates here in Montgomery County. And today I would like to review with you the process of a case. So the process that our cases go through from the beginning of the case until their conclusion. The first thing I want to talk about is where cases begin. It's important to understand what our kids have experienced before they come to us. And so somehow a report of abuse or neglect comes in, and that can come from a teacher or a neighbor or a professional or a family member, and it can come in either online or over the phone. And when that happens, it goes to an investigator that assigns it a level of severity, and based on that they have a time frame that they go out and investigate the case. They may visit the child at school or at home, and they do have the right to interview children at school without permission of the parents. And that sometimes is a challenge, makes parents angry when they find that out. They can also come and visit them at home. Sometimes a report comes in, but they're not exactly sure where that child is located, and then law enforcement may be called in to locate that family. And then a determination is made about the next steps. So there may be an emergency removal. There may be family-based safety services ordered, which are non-court ordered services, and basically the philosophy is that if we can get, this family's having some challenges, and if we can get some services there to shore them up, if we can get the electricity back on, and we can get early childhood intervention or whatever it is, this family can be safe and can stay intact. So that's family-based safety services. But again, those services are not court ordered, and so if the family chooses not to participate in those, they are not required to. The case can also result in removal, or they can close the case if they don't feel that there's grounds. When the child is removed, that's done without warning. Children can be removed at school, and many times they don't go back home. So they went to school like any other day in the morning, and they don't get the chance to go back home and say goodbye to pets or gather their things, and this can be very traumatic for kids. However that removal happens, it is very traumatic for kids, whether it happens at home or it happens at school. Many times our kids will retell that story of their removal throughout the case. It's just a very difficult thing for them. When they're removed, they may go to a kinship placement. So kinship is just somebody that had a relationship with the child before the case began. So it might be an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, but it also might be a teacher or a coach. So they may go to a kinship placement, they may go to a foster home, they may go to a residential treatment center. Residential treatment centers are located in regular neighborhoods. They're usually gender-specific homes, and they have maybe 10 to 12 children, usually older kids that are there with a paid staff. And so that's what a residential treatment center is. That staff meets the child's needs, make sure they get to school, but it is not a family situation. And then there are emergency shelters. So especially for our older kids that are harder to place, sometimes they have to go to an emergency shelter. An emergency shelter is very similar to an RTC. The only difference is that they can only stay in the emergency shelter for 90 days. So sometimes our children stay in an emergency shelter for 90 days, and then they're moved to a residential treatment center. So two transitions there, which is hard on our kids. So this is the point at which we get involved as CASAs. So the removal has already happened, the investigation has already happened, and then the case comes to CASA. And when a child comes in to the system, they need to have a medical evaluation within 72 hours. They're looking for injuries or illnesses. They also need to be enrolled in public school within 72 hours. So they may come to a new foster home or a new RTC in the evening, and the next morning they may start in a new school. And this is important for advocates to understand, because many times these kids appear in teachers' classrooms with no history, and the teachers don't understand why they might be angry or they might not be able to focus, and they can go through a lot of transition in a short period of time. The children have what's called a CANS assessment within the first 30 days, and that's a comprehensive trauma behavioral exam. And then they also have a full medical exam within 30 days. So that's a whole lot of things that go on in the beginning of the case for our kids. So then we have the court hearing process. So the first hearing is a show cause hearing. It's usually held about 2 weeks after removal. The parents are present and they're able to respond to the allegations of abuse and neglect. This usually is where the CASA meets the parents for the first time, and many of our parents who can't afford attorneys, this is where the attorney is appointed for them. CASA will try to visit the child before this hearing or shortly thereafter, and when we visit, we look at, is this placement suitable? Are they building, do they have we are building a relationship with the parents. We're contacting the school and getting their school records from CPS and making sure that they are getting all the services they need at school. We get their medical information, and we also locate and connect people with people that are important to the child. So, we have conversations with the child about, who were people that loved you, who were people that cared about you, was there a teacher, was there a coach, and then how can we keep that connection between that child and that person even during this time of big transition. The next thing is a family group conference. CASA will have reviewed the file prior to the family group conference. That file at CPS might be tiny or it might be volumes. It just depends on if there have been other cases. The family group conference is held at the CPS office, and it's attended by all the people involved in the case. The parents, CPS investigator, CPS caseworker, CPS supervisor, attorney ad litem, parents' attorneys, the CASA, and also the CASA supervisor. And at the family group conference, they review lots of things, such as the reason the child was removed, what everybody in the room's hopes and dreams are for the children. The result of this meeting is the service plan. And that's kind of mom and dad's to-do list to get their child returned. That said, if they do everything on the list, it doesn't mean that their child will be returned. If they do nothing on the list, it doesn't mean their child will not be returned. But it is a tool that's used in the process. Then there's a status hearing. That's about 2 months after the show cause hearing. That's when the service plan, so mom and dad's to-do list, is presented to the court. CASA files a court report, and on that court report we do an ACEs score. So ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it's a way that we quantitatively document how much trauma this child has experienced. And we make recommendations to the court at this hearing about placement, educational needs, medical needs, and how the search for relatives is going. Then there's 3 permanency hearings usually throughout a case, and at those they review the parent's service plan, how are they doing on that to-do list. We write a court report for every one of those, and CASA again makes recommendations. Do we feel good about where the child's placed? Is that the best place for them? How are they doing in school? Are they getting the services they need? And all their medical needs being met. In the 5th month, there's another permanency conference. It's like the family group conference, only shorter. And basically, it reviews the service plan, and it's a review of the children's status. And this is where the permanency goals can be changed. So the majority of our cases will start with reunification as the primary goal. And as the case progresses, it may turn into relative adoption or unrelated adoption, depending on how mom and dad are doing with their service plan. All of our cases go to mediation, and that is held at the Dispute Resolution Center on the 1st floor of the courthouse. We work very hard to get our cases completed during mediation. We don't want to go to trial. The attorneys don't want to go to trial. And so we do everything we can to get things solved at mediation. At mediation, they're professionally trained volunteer mediators, and all parties in the case are present. So the parents, CPS, CASA, the attorney ad litem, and the parents' attorneys. and the goal is to come to a mediated agreement so we don't have to go to trial. If we're not able to accomplish that, then we do go to trial. And we can have either a bench trial or a jury trial. So a bench trial means the judge, and jury is a jury trial. We at CASA prefer a bench trial. They're more predictable, but we have some jury trials every year. And it's the parent's attorney that gets to request a jury trial if they would like that. The advocate has to be present at trial. If they are not present, the trial has to be reset. So those dates are known well in advance, and the advocates know they have to be present. All decisions in the trial are final. So if termination of parental rights is ordered, that decision is final. I've heard it referred to as the parental death penalty. It cannot, you can't go back 5 years later and revise that decision. So it's a very serious decision. Sometimes permanent managing conservatorship is ordered. So that may be an older child that, it used to be called like a ward of the state. Basically means that the state is their parent. And some of our children, that is the resolution to the case. Sometimes they have permanent managing conservatorship to a kinship placement. So the parents will agree to them staying with the kinship placement. Kinship placement has decision-making authority, but the parental rights are not formally terminated always. And then reunification is another option. So that's the process of a case through our court system, and hope it was helpful for you. Thank you.